morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning with our program. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Pat Kane, Public Programs and Visitor Services Coordinator with the Museum of the Grand Prairie, and doing other cultural and historical programs throughout the, there it is, Champaign County Forest Preserve District. And we're going to kick off our virtual Harvest Fest program right now this morning. In just a few moments, I'm going to bring on Kim Sheehan, Assistant Director of Education at Spurlock Museum, where she is going to tell some awesome, scary stories that are kid-friendly as well. One thing before we get started, before I turn it over to Kim, let us know where you're watching from this morning. Write it down in the comment section below. I'm streaming live from my house in Champaign, Illinois. As you can see, we are very festive here at the Kane household. My wife did an excellent job decorating the fireplace behind me, and she said to make sure to let everybody know that she did the decorating. So she did an awesome job. But let us know where you're watching from today, whether you're watching from Central Illinois, other parts of the state, other parts of the United States, maybe even across the world. Write that down in the comment section below. This program is a part of our virtual Harvest Fest event, as I just mentioned. This is a popular annual program we do every October, and unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, we cannot do it in person, but we're trying our best to do it virtually this year. So this is the first program of first activity, first piece of content that will premiere throughout the day on our Facebook and YouTube pages where you are watching us right now. So tune in throughout the day for a whole bunch of awesome content, a part of the Harvest Fest event. You can check out the event schedule on our Facebook page and the Facebook events tab to learn what will be coming at you later on today. See, my mom is watching from Rantoul. Hey, Mom. She hasn't seen the Halloween decorations in the house yet, so this is what it looks like. But let us know where you're watching from. Write that down in the comment section below. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Sheehan. As I mentioned, she is the Assistant Director of Education at the Spurlock Museum, and every year comes out and tells some really awesome, scary stories next to our campfire out at the Harvest Fest annual event, and I'm excited to have her join us this morning. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to Kim Sheehan.
Yay! Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be back to the Harvest Fest. And I was thinking, okay, it's 10 in the morning. What can we do to make it feel more like a scary time around the campfire? So I thought I brought my my quilted vest with the little hood on the top, which I would normally wear when I'm storytelling at a campfire. This way you can still see my arms and everything, but it usually keeps me warm. I also have one of my very favorite drinking cups today. It's very Halloween in its theme, but it also, let me push the button. There we go. It lights up. So this is our campfire. Okay, so you might see it kind of flickering for the next few seconds over there to my side, but getting a little bit more in the mood for what we're going to be doing. Now, considering I had no idea what age my audience was going to be today, I do have two, let's call them more spooky stories, okay? But nothing that's super, super scary, no big blood or anything. And I'm sorry if that disappoints a lot of you, but the last thing I want is for anybody not being able to sleep tonight, who's very small. So I just hope you enjoy the fact that we're telling some good stories, okay? And I want to start with a classic, one that has been around forever, one that I'm hoping that I've changed just enough so that even if you're familiar with the story, you're still going to enjoy it. And if you do know the story and there are other people sitting around the computer listening to the story who may not know the ending, I would very, very much appreciate it if you would keep it a secret until we get to the end, okay? So this is the Blue Velvet Ribbon. There was a new girl at the high school, and Johnny saw her when she came into homeroom first thing in the morning, and she was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And he thought, she'd be even more beautiful if she would smile. But it was her first day. She was a new girl and she was too nervous to smile. But Johnny watched her in homeroom, and then she was in math with him the next hour, and then the next and the next. And Johnny got to really, you know, look at how pretty she was, but also to see how smart she was too. Well, it came time for lunch, and he thought, okay, I really want to meet her. What should I do? And he thought about all those things that his parents had always told him in terms of meeting a new person. And one of the things they always stressed was say something nice about the person. And Johnny had been thinking of what that would be. And one of the things he had noticed that morning was that um, this girl, her name was Amelia. He loved that name. But the girl was wearing this blue velvet ribbon around her neck. And at one point, he saw that that ribbon matched her eyes. So he thought that might be a good thing to talk about. So everybody went into the lunchroom, and Amelia got her tray and she sat down at a table. Nobody else was there. She didn't have any friends yet to sit with. And so Johnny came up and had his tray, stood across the table from her, and said, Hi, my name is Johnny. And she said, I've seen you in my classes this morning. My name is Amelia. And he said, Yeah, I know, I heard. I wanted to let you know that I thought that your ribbon matched your eyes, and it was just the most beautiful shade of blue. Could I sit with you and talk for a while? And while Johnny was talking, while Johnny was doing this, what he thought was wonderful compliment, she just kind of closed down. Um, Johnny, I think you're very, very polite, and I really appreciate that you have asked to sit here, and I would love to spend lunch with you, but I just need to tell you one thing, and that is I don't ever talk about my ribbon. Oh, Johnny said, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry, but if you'll let me sit here, I'll try to make it up to you. And so they sat down and they talked, and it was a wonderful conversation. They found out they had so much in common, and they just laughed, and she began to smile, and he had been right. He knew once she smiled, it would be radiant. And I think Johnny fell in love right there in the lunchroom. But it was just the beginning. Once they had met, once they'd had that conversation, they were inseparable. They were together every minute they could be. And Johnny loved it, but he still had now this nagging in the back of his head that, first of all, Amelia didn't want to talk about this blue ribbon, but second, she wore it every single day. And it never seemed to get dirty. It never frazzled. It never broke. It was just always there. But he loved Amelia, and he tried his best not to let it bother him. Well, on graduation day from high school, Johnny got down on one knee and he proposed to Amelia, and of course she said yes. On their wedding day, Johnny saw Amelia coming up the aisle, beautiful white gown, and that blue ribbon around her neck. Now, that night, he'd been thinking, Johnny had, that maybe she didn't want to talk about the ribbon because it might be something embarrassing, or something that you really had to trust somebody to tell him about. But he thought, we just got married. She has told me she's going to trust me for the rest of my life, and I've told her. And so he went up to Amelia and he held her hand and he said, "Honey, you know I love you, and I hope that you trust me, and and I hope that that trust means that maybe you'll talk to me about your ribbon." Amelia said, "Johnny, I just can't talk about it, okay? And it's the only thing in the whole universe that I won't trust you about, but please, please don't ask." All right, Johnny said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. No, honey, she said, I just don't want to talk about it. Well, things went really well. And a little over a year after they got married, they had a baby, a beautiful girl. And they were just so happy. And that girl, she had blue eyes, just the same color as her mother's. And one night, the baby was kind of fussing a little bit in her um, cradle, and so Johnny went over to to rub her belly a little and speak softly to her and let her get back to sleep. And as he is looking at this little baby and thinking about, oh, she has eyes just like her mother, and that thought came right back, the same color as the ribbon. And so we thought, okay, she loves me. She married me. We have a baby. Certainly, certainly, I can find out what it is about this blue velvet ribbon. And so when the baby was sleeping again, um, Johnny went over to the bed and he kind of sat down next to where his wife was sleeping and kind of put an arm around her to hold her and feel how warm and snuggly she was. And then very softly, he took hold of an end of the bow on that ribbon and he pulled. And the ribbon came off in his hand, and Amelia's head rolled into his lap, her blue eyes dead but staring at him. And that's the story of the blue velvet ribbon. Like I said, you may have heard other versions of it. I love when I can find lots of versions of the same story. I love it when I can kind of make one up on my own. And like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. So, my second story is one I actually just found this week. And it was in a book of spooky stories from around the world. And considering I work at the Spurlock Museum, I'm in the museum right now, and we are a museum of world cultures. I love to be able to tell folk tales from all over the world. So the tale that I'm about to tell you is from Tibet. So I want you to think mountains and cold. Okay. And the name of our story is The Old Ogre. Now, one of the main characters in the story is a fox. And in many parts of East Asia, Southeast Asia, foxes are tricksters. A trickster is an animal or a person who very logically tricks another animal or another person. And so, watch how clever Fox is in this story. So, one day, there was a mother and a daughter, and the mother needed to go run some errands. And the daughter just was happy staying home, but the mother wanted to make sure that she gave some very strict instructions to her daughter. She wasn't that old, and the mother wanted to make sure she was protected. So she said, "Now, as soon as I leave, I want you to make sure that the front door and the back door are locked, and don't let anybody in until I come home." "Yes, Mama," the little girl said. And so mother went out and she stood right outside the door until she heard her daughter lock that door. And off she went to do her errands. Now, it just so happened that on that mountain lived an ogre. He lived in one of the caves up higher on the mountain. And this ogre ate people. So as you can imagine, that's one of the reasons the mother wanted to have the door locked, was in case the ogre came by. She wanted her daughter to be safe. Well, it just so happened that the ogre was coming out of the woods near the mother and daughter's house as the mother was telling her daughter to make sure to be safe and to lock the doors. So the ogre waited until the mother was out of sight and said, "Aha, I am going to have a little girl for breakfast." And so the ogre went up to the door and said in his most motherly like voice, Dear, it's your mother. I have forgotten something and I need to come back in to get it so I can go run my errands. Please unlock the door for me." Well, the little girl inside was pretty sure that that voice did not go with her mother. And so she said, "If you're my mother, I want you to do this for me." Now, you'll notice here at the front door, there's a little hole in the wood of the door. What I want you to do, she said, is put your hand in front of that hole and I can look at it and guarantee you are my mother. "All right," the ogre said, and the ogre put his hand in front of that hole in the door. And basically all the little girl could see was that the hand in front of the hole in the door was very, very hairy, which meant, it wasn't her mother. "I'm not going to let you in. You are not my mother," the little girl said. And so the ogre thought, he said, "Well, dear, I am on my way home and I have to go through the forest. And you know, there's leaves all over and it's really, really shady. And sometimes it's kind of hard to see in the forest. Could I borrow a lantern from you and then, light the candle in it so I can see on my way home?" Well, that wasn't a bad request, and it didn't require the little girl to open up the door. So she took a lantern and she put a candle in it and she lit the candle. And now she didn't want to open the front door because she knew whatever it was right outside the front door. So she took that lantern with the lit candle and she went to the back door and she unlocked it and she opened it just far enough to put that lantern out there. Boom, close the door and lock it. Well, the ogre didn't know it was going to the back door until it was too late, but it was okay with the ogre because the ogre didn't really want the lantern to be able to see in the forest. He had just come through the forest. What he wanted was to take that candle, which he did, and he used the flame to burn off all the hair on his hand and his arm. Dear, it's your mother. Please unlock the door. I've forgotten something." And the little girl went to the door. "Mother, put your hand in front of that hole so I can see you," the little girl said. "Oh, okay." And the ogre put his hand in front of the door in the hole again. And all the little girl could see really was that it was a hand without hair. So, well, that must be her mother. And she unlocked the door and boom, in came the ogre. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And the girl just started, it was a little house, but she started running all around. It's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get away from this ogre? And she got an idea. And she ended up climbing up into the beams at the top of the house. And it was so high up, the ogre couldn't reach her. But the ogre had an excellent nose, and he started sniffing around the house until he finally sniffed that the little girl was right above him. "I know you're there," the ogre said. "I'm not going to pretend to be your mother anymore. But what I need is for you to tell me this. How did you climb up there?" And the girl thought, what am I going to say? I got it. I got up here because I made a pile of needles and I climbed up that pile of needles to get up here. "Okay," the ogre said. And so the ogre went all over the house getting needles. Now, it didn't make a very big pile, because you don't keep that many needles around the house. But The ogre thought, well, at least it gets me a little bit higher and towards that set of beams there. And so he stepped on those needles. Ah! Ow! Ow! Oh, girl! And he sat down and he pulled all of those needles out of his feet. He was so angry. I know you lied to me, little girl, the ogre said. Tell me, how did you climb up there? The little girl thought again and said, I made a pile of cups and I climbed up those cups and that made it so that I could reach the beam. The ogre said, all right, you better be telling me the truth. And so the ogre went around the house, found as many cups as he could, and he went to step on that pile of cups to climb up. But ogres are big, ogres are heavy, and that whole pile of cups just crashed. Little girl, I am furious. Now, normally, I kill people before I eat them, but because you have made me so angry, if you do not tell me the truth, I will eat you alive. And the girl was so scared, she told him the truth. She said, you'll see there's some barrels over there, and I put a pile of barrels together, and I climbed up the barrels, and that's how I got up here. And so the ogre did the same thing. He got up there. He was able to reach that girl, grab her by the arm, and drag her out of the house and all the way to his cave, where he put her into a sack and tied up the top. Now, when the mother got home from doing all of her errands, what did she encounter first but an open front door? She called for her daughter. She looked all over the house and she realized something bad had happened. And of course, with the ogre living on the mountain, that was the first thing she thought of. The ogre's got her. So she knew it was quite a hike to be able to get to the ogre, and she wanted to make sure that she had plenty of energy when she got there. So she packed a bag of some food to take with her as she hiked up the mountain. The whole time she's like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get my daughter away from this ogre? This is terrible. And as she was walking, she happened to encounter a fox. And that fox looked up at her and it kind of blinked its eyes and it was just looking so sad. And the mother looked down and said, Fox, you look very, very hungry. And so she took that bag she had and she took, a fox-sized meal out of the bag and put it down in front of the fox, and the fox ate it right up. And he began to jump and he was smiling, and the mother said, now Fox, I've fed you, I've done you a favor. Will you do me a favor and help me find my daughter? And the fox followed the mother as she continued to hike up the mountain, where she and the fox encountered a wolf. The wolf looked very, very hungry. And so very quickly, the mother again reached into her bag and got a wolf-sized meal of food, put it down on the ground in front of the wolf, and just like the fox, the wolf went and ate it all up and looked much, much happier than he had before. So the mother looked at the wolf and said, Wolf, I have done a favor for you. Will you do a favor for me? I think the ogre has my daughter. Will you come and help me get her? And the mother started walking, trying again to find the cave of the ogre, and the fox and the wolf right behind her. Now, they found the cave. And that ogre's cave, in front of that cave was a big flock of sheep. The ogre kept those in case he couldn't find a person to eat and he needed something else to snack on. And the mother thought for a second and said, Wolf, this is where I will need your help. I want you to go and I want you to get into that flock of sheep and I want you to scare them and just chase them out of sight. And the wolf did that. He started growling, and they went into the flock of sheep, and the sheep were like, bah, bah, and they all began running all over the place, and the wolf was chasing after them and chased them out of sight. Now, the ogre heard all of this noise, and he came out to see what was going on. Now, when he got there, he saw his sheep were gone, and really the only thing at the entrance to his cave was this fox. And the ogre was very unhappy at this whole situation and began to chase the fox. Now, that fox was little, but boy, he was quick. And the ogre just started chasing him everywhere. And the ogre just got madder and madder because the fox was getting away. But the fox was good and made sure the ogre was out of sight of the cave. And the mother snuck in and she looked around the cave. There were all of these bones of people that the ogre had eaten before. But there was a sack in that cave, and the sack was moving. The mother ran over, opened up the sack, and of course, the daughter was inside. And the daughter said, Mother, thank you for coming to get me. Thank you so much. And they hugged. And the mother said, we've got to get out of here. We have got to get home and back behind locked doors. Yes, Mother, the daughter said. And so, hand in hand, they began running down the mountain and safely back home. Now, the ogre had been chasing that wolf for quite a while, and finally he realized he really wasn't big enough of a bite for the ogre to eat anyway. So he thought, I've still got that little girl there. She can be breakfast for me. That'll be fine. But when the ogre got back to the cave and went inside, he saw that that sack was empty and the little girl had escaped. Now, the ogre had been mad most of the day. He was furious. He now had nothing to eat. He was exhausted. And all he could think of was going back down to the house where the mother and the daughter lived. And the mother was going to be lunch because the daughter was already planned for breakfast. Now, as the ogre started going down the mountain towards their house, who should he run into but Fox? Now, Fox was sitting right at the edge of a cliff that went down thousands of feet to the bottom. And the ogre came by and said, You have been a problem for me this morning, Fox. You run too fast, but you're here right now. I'm going to grab you, and you're going to be my appetizer before my breakfast. I have no idea what you're talking about, Fox said. There are thousands of foxes all over these mountains. I am not a trick-playing fox. I am a basket-weaving fox. And indeed, in front of him was a half-done basket, a huge basket that Fox had been working on. And the fox said, can't trick you, but, I can teach you how to weave a basket. Would you like to learn that? And Ogre thought, well, I'll still eat the fox when it's all done, but sure, I'd like to learn a new skill, so I'll learn how to do the basket. Now, as I'm sure you figured out, this was the same fox that he had been chasing, and this was his trick. He told the ogre to sit in the middle of the basket. You see, ogre, Fox said, if you sit in the middle and you can see how putting all the different grasses and things works from the inside of the walls, it's a lot easier to learn how to do than if you're sitting on the outside. So go ahead and sit here right in the middle of the basket. Okay, the ogre said, and the ogre sat in the middle of the basket. And Fox just kept up this talking and teaching. It's like, oh, we have to put this grass this way and this one goes this way. Now make sure you use the right kind of grass. And he just kept building and building and building and building this basket. And the ogre was so intent on listening to how to make a basket, he didn't notice until it was too late that that fox was making a basket that was completely closed, like a ball. And before the ogre had half a second to figure out how to get out of that basket, Fox got up. He came around to the back of that basket, put his hands up against it, and shoved it right over the side of the cliff. And the ogre went down and down and down until he crashed at the bottom. And the ogre on that mountain was no longer a problem. And that's the story of the old ogre from Tibet. I hope you enjoyed my stories. Please stick around and enjoy the whole rest of the Harvest Fest. And thank you for being such great listeners. Bye.
Thank you so much, Kim. Those are some excellent stories, getting me really in the mood here, here in October. And it's nice to actually be able to hear the stories myself, because with the in-person Harvest Fest event, there's a lot of moving parts happening, and sometimes I don't get to hear as many of the stories. So it's actually nice to sit down and listen to some. Yeah, you did an excellent job. Thank you. Ramona is watching from Elgin, and she said thank you as well.
Oh,
I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And as Kim mentioned, this is just the first piece of our virtual Harvest Fest today. Tune in throughout the day on our Facebook and YouTube page for more. Ramona is saying encore. I know Kim does storytelling on the Spurlock Museum page all the time. Is that right, Kim?
We just recently changed things around a little bit, but each Wednesday on the Facebook page for Spurlock, from 1:15 to 1:45, I just do stories from around the world. Sometimes there's themes, sometimes it's just stories that I love, but we have a really good time. So please come and join us.
Yeah. Check out the Spurlock Museum Facebook page for Kim's stories on there. She does a really excellent job with those stories. So again, thank you to Kim. Thank you to all of you out there watching, and stay tuned throughout the day for more Museum of the Grand Prairie Harvest Fest content. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in this morning. My name is Pat Kane, and we're here for another edition of Mornings with the Museum. The theme this week is scary stories, and we will get to all that scary, odd, and weird stuff in just a few moments. But before we do that, let's go around and figure out who is on this edition of Morning. So we'll go around and introduce ourselves to the audience. Again, I'm Pat Kane, Public Programs Visitor Services Coordinator here at the Museum of the Grand Prairie, and doing other cultural and historical programs throughout the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. Barb, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, I'm Barb Olschlager-Garvey. I'm the director of the Museum and Education Department for the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
Thank you, Barb.
And the phone rang.
Katie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm the education program specialist here at the museum, as part of the Champaign County Forest Preserve.
And Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Mark Hansen. I am the curator at the Museum of the Grand Prairie.
Excellent. So it looks like Pat is occupied right at the moment, but which is scary all by itself. But we're going to tell you some stories about our artifacts today, and we're going to tell you some stories about scary stories in the area, and you will be really spooked. Okay, go ahead.
I think he's back.
That is back. That was scary.
The beauty of live programming. caller was calling. They were curious if we had any more corn husk dolls. And yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I am
I'm going to answer it the same.
Oh, we've got some, but we don't have a lot. Yeah, so we had a corn husk doll giveaway kit, and in anticipation of a virtual Harvest Fest that is going to happen this weekend. And we do have a few, and I do mean a few, maybe 10 left. I'm going to be on the porch between 2 and 4 this afternoon. So if you'd like one, come early. And we're happy to see that folks like that. We'll try to think of some other fun kits we can give away during this pandemic time.
thanks, Katie. Thanks for taking the phone too, Barb.
There was no one there. Talk about scary.
Thanks to you three for joining us today here on this Mornings with the Museum program. And we're just going to dive right into the Scary Stories program. One thing, if you haven't done so already, let us know where you're watching from this morning. Write it down in the comment section below. Pat Gallowich says she's watching from Chicagoland. Good friend Perry Morris says he's tuning in from Urbana too. So thanks to Pat and Perry for tuning in. Let us know where you're watching from. But go ahead and write that down below if you haven't done so already. Also, this is a live program designed to be a live Q&A at the same time. So if you have any questions for us, questions about the scary and the mysterious, write those down below. Questions about what we talk about today, questions about the museum in general or anything, write those down in the comment section below, and we can answer those questions here live to the best of our abilities. So as I said, we're just going to jump right into today's program because we have a lot of really, really great stuff to discuss. And again, the theme is scary stories. And let's just go ahead and get going with the scary stuff. Who would like to go first and discuss their things today, their stories, their scary stories?
I can go because I just have one, so maybe I should go first.
Okay.
I know
Go ahead.
people had more, so
Go ahead.
Pat can pull up pictures. So I was looking at, and you might hear a squeak, squeak, squeak in the background because I have a dog who's chewing on a toy. So that's not any interference. That's just the dog. So I was very intrigued by this whole thing called morning jewelry. Not like early in the morning, MOUR and morning. And so it appears that morning jewelry has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it became really popular during the time of the American Civil War. What you're looking at right here that's in our collection, and it's a watch fob, and we have 2 watch fobs in our collection. And so it would hold like a little pocket watch, and that is actual hair that is braided. So you could have watch fobs, you could have necklaces, you could have little lockets that had very intricate weavings of someone's hair. And it was a way of holding a person that had passed away kind of close to your heart. So it became extremely popular during Victorian times. Queen Victoria had lost her husband Albert, and they were, by all accounts, very much in love, and it was a sudden death, and she went into a very extended mourning time. I mean, there were mourning times where you'd wear certain colors of clothes and certain kinds of jewelry, but her mourning time was kind of extended and kind of happened at the same time period as our Civil War time period. And a lot of people were obviously dying. That was a very bloody, very horrible war. At that time, photographs existed, but not for the most, typically people like you and I wouldn't be able to have photographs of our loved ones. So when they passed away, you might want to have something to remember them by. So this was a way of wearing and keeping that person close to you. And they didn't have pictures to go through. They didn't have like old text to read. They didn't have videos to look at. So it seems weird to us, but the more I thought about it, especially in this kind of uncertain time of pandemics, the more it didn't seem weird. And actually, these became so popular that I guess people would sell their hair to jewelry makers, and some people would just wear jewelry made out of hair that wasn't from a loved one. So I just thought that was super interesting.
And kind of creepy.
Well, a little creepy, but the more I thought about it, the less creepy it came in my head. It might, it is on the surface creepy, but think about it. They just wanted a way to hold people dear, right? And there's even something now, we think of this as kind of archaic and everything. You can send ashes of a loved one to some company out there and they will make it into a diamond for you if you wanted to, wear them close to your heart on a locket or whatever. So it's gone, but it's not all the way gone. I don't think people are doing the hair thing anymore. But yeah, mourning jewelry. If you look it up, there are so many examples, such intricate ones. So I wondered about these. We didn't have a backstory because they came from the Redhead collection. If these were somebody's loved one or just something they bought in a catalog or what. There you go, mourning jewelry, hair.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when you said, Katie, about the diamond that you can have created.
Yeah.
I've seen people have ashes of loved ones in like a locket or some sort of
Yeah.
thing that they wear around their neck or on their wrist or
like little dots. And so it's not totally gone.
Yeah, Jordan is watching out there. She said it's kind of sweet, and she says she has a lock of my toddler's hair in his baby book. So
yeah, a lot of people do that. My mother, my hair, believe it or not, used to be blonde, and she has like a blonde braid, which seems really weird when you find it. But and I haven't passed away, but a lot of people do that. They cut off a little piece of their little one's hair to remember them when they were little, I guess, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that, Katie. So mourning jewelry, one thing we're discussing this morning. Who would like to go next? Barb or Mark? Who wants to take it next here?
You want to go, Barb? You want me to go?
I'll go. It's fine. So I chose to talk about hauntings. And then, there are thousands of hauntings. And of course, since we're a local history museum, I decided to talk about local ones. Mm-hmm. And narrowing it down was almost impossible, but I'll try to speed through my 3 hauntings because I thought they were fun. Well, they're not exactly fun. Probably the most commonly known one in the whole area is the English building, which was once the women's building. And this is perfect because it ties right into our year of the suffrage anniversary, women's suffrage, that is. So women were admitted to the university very early in the 1870s, but there was no provision made for them to live here. So the YWCA came forward and got some housing together, but the university didn't really get a building together until 1905. So this was once the women's building from 1905 to 1946 when it became kind of the home ec building. And then 1956, it finally was renamed as the English building and it was no longer a women's dormitory. Well, having said all that, of course, somebody supposedly died here. Pat, you want to go ahead and show the next slide? There was once a swimming pool in this area. And can you show the next one? So there's some women in the women's building swimming in the women's swimming pool. And apparently a woman drowned there, or maybe she jumped from the gallery and hurt herself somehow. But anyway, and of course it was over a broken love affair. So so people have said ever since, although there's no evidence anywhere of this woman's suicide in the newspapers, for example, but then the university used to hide stuff like that too. So who knows? But every kind of haunting you could possibly imagine has been reported. So cold spots, the lights turn themselves on and off. You see shadows of people walking down the hall. Doors closed and open themselves. And of course, people have heard a woman scream. So be careful if you're going to take an English class at the University of Illinois, because you never know what will happen. One of them even was a penny falling from the ceiling for no reason at all. So there you go. That's the first haunting. The second one is a little bit more explainable. This is the First Presbyterian Church in downtown Champaign. And I love its address. It's on the corner of Church and State. Ha ha ha. In downtown Champaign. It's the oldest, actually the oldest still existing church in Champaign County. And it was founded in the 1850s. And by the 1880s, there was supposedly a haunting there. So a group of young boys first reported the haunting. They saw a ghost repeatedly, night after night. They saw a ghost. They ran home, they screamed, they told their fathers. The fathers would come out and look for the ghost, and there was no ghost. Finally, after weeks of this, a policeman caught the ghost, and the guy he was a man dressed up in a white suit, a white sheet, and he admitted that he was annoyed with his own son, and this was a way to take revenge on him. So not all hauntings are real, apparently. that was my second favorite one. And then this is the Urbana Courthouse. So it was recently renovated, and it still has this beautiful tower. The tower was renovated too. But in 1905, it was a brand new courthouse. It was only a year old. And in the Urbana Courier, there was an article that said, tells a gruesome tale. And what was happening was the elevator was running by itself. It was going up and down by itself. The sheriff was convinced that the new building was haunted. And the janitor decided it was because the elevator was right on the spot where someone had been hung 8 years before, because there was a courthouse here before. It was just a different courthouse. And I just wanted to quote to finish this out, I just wanted to quote the article because it was just great. It has made several trips up and down the shaft with no one to start or stop it. It was one of those kinds that takes a lot of elbow grease to run, so it can't really do this by itself. So you have to know a little bit about turn of the century elevators to figure out that it really couldn't do it by itself. You had to hold the button and hold it down in order for it to move. Mm-hmm. But was it a ghost? Was it mechanical failure? Who will know? Not now. Those are my local hauntings.
That's interesting, though, like from a cultural standpoint, how they went to haunting so quickly, you know?
Right. Oh,
yeah.
Well, and I mean, you know, if there weren't too many hangings in Champaign County. Mm-hmm. So it must have been really fresh in their minds.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's a traumatic thing. So yeah, I'm sure that the area resonated with that anyway. And then, yeah, to go so quickly to haunting is kind of, and the sheriff went on record as saying he was convinced it was haunted.
Somebody with, you know, big stature within the community says that, then a lot of people are going to follow, you know?
Yep. Beware that, I mean, when I first came to the University of Illinois, both the architecture building and Lincoln Hall had elevators that worked like that. And they had a glass door so you could see through it, and a cage door that also closed. So you could see yourself going up and down, and you couldn't, it didn't have any memory, right? So I know what kind of elevator this is, and it doesn't move by itself. It was cool.
Yeah. No, those are great stories of local hauntings. If you know of any others and you wanted to share them with us, write those stories of local hauntings that you know about down in the comments section. Maybe something you've experienced yourself or something you've heard about. Write that down in the comment section. We'd love to hear your stories of local hauntings too. Thanks, Barb.
Sure.
Mark, I know you got some interesting things to show us.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna reshare the screen here, and you can go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so I picked 3 artifacts that are not so much about hauntings, but are a little perhaps gruesome and mysterious and perhaps odd. The first one is this artifact here. This is actually a surgical instrument. It's called a trephining saw. And its purpose is basically to cut a small circle of bone out of someone's skull. Trephining is suspected to be, well, it's one of the oldest, I guess what we would call surgical procedures that archaeologists find in the archaeological record. They find examples of trephining going back 7,000 years. This saw actually has a pretty interesting story behind it. It was purchased by the first doctor to live in Tolono, Illinois. He got his medical degree from in, I think, New York State. And then after he got his medical degree, he went to Paris, France, to study more and sort of, become a better doctor. And while he was there, he bought a set of surgical tools. And this was one of the surgical tools that he bought when he was there. After he came back from France, he and his wife moved to Tolono, where he practiced, I believe, until 1900 or thereabouts. After his death, his wife gave his surgical equipment to another doctor in Tolono, who, after his death, his wife gave these same tools to another doctor in Tolono. And then after that doctor passed away, his children donated this set of tools to the museum. So this tool is probably dates to around 1855. So Civil War vintage, getting into that time frame. And believe it or not, there are quite a few doctors' case notes from the Civil War where they actually talk about trephining on wounded soldiers during the Civil War. They are incredibly graphic. And even in the Civil War, it sounds like doctors realized that drilling into someone's skull was probably a last resort. So a lot of soldiers, if they were wounded so severely that this was an option, most of them died. But remarkably, many didn't. Trephining was thought to have saved their life. So sort of a barbaric, gross thing that seems to have at least saved some people with a great local story. So trephining saw.
Mark, real quick, is there any mention in those doctor's notes, or do you know, was there any numbing or some form of anesthesia that would take place before this would be used?
Probably not. Most of in the reports that I've read, these folks were in such a bad state that they were either unconscious or, so they don't really talk about anesthesia as we would hope there would be anesthesia today. That's not saying there wasn't something, but they really don't talk about that.
Gotcha. Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, what do we have next, Pat? Ah, yes. So this is a lovely horsehide coat, probably from the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was donated by a local Champaign County family. What's interesting about this coat, I mean, we hear a lot about horsehide robes in sleighs and buggies during the winter. Well, this horsehide coat supposedly was made by the donor's, I believe, great-grandfather. And it was made from his favorite horse. His favorite horse died, and so he decided that it would be great to have a coat, a hat, and a pair of gloves made from his favorite horse. The hat and gloves no longer exist, but we have the horsehide coat. This wasn't homemade. It was actually sent to a company. There's actually a tag in the back, you know, where they made the coat. And one of the interesting features, and I'm not sure you can see it on the, if you're looking at the photo on the right-hand shoulder, the horse's eyelashes were also incorporated into the coat, and they are they appear to be little fringe on the shoulder seam of the coat. So yeah,
So the horse is always looking at you.
the horse is always there. It's actually a pretty big garment, and it's heavy. I can't imagine wearing it, but they must have been sturdier folk back then. Yeah, the last one. This one is just sort of sort of a mystery. So this was donated to us by a family who came to the area from Ohio, first settling in Sydney and then later settling in Philo. The patriarch of the family had this lock, and it always sat on a windowsill in the shed out back of the house. The family remembers this lock always sitting there. It was always locked. Was never talked about, but the patriarch always had the key with him and would never talk about it. And when he died, he wanted to be buried with the key to this lock. And to this day, the family doesn't know what the significance of this lock was, other than it was never opened. It always sort of had a place of reverence. And at the gentleman's death, he took the key to the lock with him. So, little mysterious,
Buried with his secrets.
Yep.
Ooh.
I think I'm going to now. We have a Maltese Yorkie. She's a very tiny dog. She weighs about 8 pounds, but get ready for some gloves, maybe a scarf, maybe a hat to continue to honor her once.
Oh, I hope Catherine's not listening. You're going to be in trouble.
There you go.
Hopefully that's not for quite a long time, though. So.
But there again, thinking about the coat, sort of with what Katie was talking about with the jewelry. I mean, farm folk were, you know, waste not, want not. So, you know, why animal dies? Why, you know, why waste it? You can make something out of it. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, when you think about it, your hair is a renewable resource too. So why not use it?
Yeah. So who knows? Eyelashes.
And we all know that from the pandemic that we just keep growing hair and not getting it cut. So.
Put it to good use. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you three, you know, for the mysterious, the odd, the weird things discussed today. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any odd stories of hauntings that you would like to share, you can write that down in the comment section below. Keep the conversation going. But I want to thank Barb, Katie, and Mark for joining us today. Thank you for watching. And until we meet again for another Mornings with Museum, check us out on all of our social media pages. Visit museumofthegrandprairie.org or the Champaign County Forest Preserve District website at ccfpd.org to learn a whole bunch more.
Thank you for tuning into CU Wise TV. We hope you enjoyed the show. This video can be accessed anytime on youtube.com. In the YouTube search bar, type in UPTV6 and look for their microphone logo. We hope you will join us again next week for more local, engaging content designed specifically for Champaign